Hello, my name is Mark. I'm 27. I live in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, and I work remotely as a software engineer for a mid-sized startup. Nothing fancy, mostly back-end stuff, long hours, and a lot of coffee. I've been in a relationship for 3 years with a woman named Tina, and lately I don't even know what to call it anymore. I used to be in love with her, I mean head over heels. When we first met, she was confident, charming, full of energy. I felt lucky to be with someone like her, but over time that energy turned into something else. Something cold, critical, distant. She's always comparing me to her ex. Trevor had abs by this time last year. She said last week Trevor had goals. He was going places. Why do you never want to improve yourself, Mark? It's constant. Everything I do or don't do becomes an issue. From a food I order to the way I walk. I'm not exaggerating. 2 nights ago, she actually mocked the way I walked across the room. I try. God knows I try. I pay the bills. I clean up. I cancel plans to be with her when she says she's lonely, only for her to sit on her phone all evening. And still, it's like I'm never enough. There's always something I didn't do, something I should have done better, some imaginary version of me I'm failing to live up to. Today started like most days. She woke up annoyed that I forgot to move the laundry last night. I was up debugging an API until 3 a.m., but that didn't matter. You can't even handle the basics, she muttered as she slammed the cabinet. Then she said it again, the line I'm so used to hearing now. Maybe you should think about what I'm doing here, wasting my time with someone who doesn't even want to grow. She says, I should be grateful that most women wouldn't put up with a guy like me. The messed up part, I started to believe it. Around noon, I couldn't focus. My brain was fogged up, and every little ping from Slack made me want to throw my laptop out the window. I needed to get out of the apartment, just breathe. So I grabbed my backpack and walked a few blocks to this coffee shop I used to go to when I freelanced. Maple and Pine, quiet place, wooden tables, mellow music, lots of plants. I figured I'd get some air plug in and maybe reset my brain a little. I ordered a black coffee and sat near the window. Tried to focus, failed. Just kept staring at the screen, watching the cursor blink like it was mocking me. A voice interrupted. Long day already. I looked up. It was the barista. She wasn't the usual girl who worked here a year ago. This one had auburn hair tied up in a loose bun freckles, and the kind of calm smile you don't see much anymore. I gave a weak smile back, something like that. She nodded. Well, if you need something stronger than coffee, let me know. I chuckled. It caught me off guard. Someone just being kind, not sarcastic, not judging. She left, and I went back to pretending to type, but I couldn't stop thinking about how different that interaction felt compared to my morning. About an hour later, she came around again to clean the tables. You're still here. That's usually either a good sign or a sign of total burnout. Maybe both, I replied, then surprised myself by saying, I'm Mark. Julia, she said, nodding with a soft grin. I didn't mean to talk, I really didn't. But it just kind of spilled out. I told her I work in tech. I live nearby and I just needed to escape my apartment for a bit. She said she gets that sometimes being around the wrong energy can kill you slowly and you don't notice until you're already running on fumes. I nodded, and then I said it. I don't know why I didn't plan to, but I looked at her and said, You look better than my girlfriend. As soon as the words left my mouth, I felt like a complete idiot. My eyes widened a little. I was ready to apologize or laugh it off, but she just looked at me for a second, then smiled. Not a flirty smile, not sarcastic, just a smile, warm, understanding, almost sad. She said, Then maybe you're with the wrong girl. As she walked away, I sat there frozen, embarrassed, confused, guilty, relieved. I didn't know what just happened, but I knew I hadn't felt that scene in a long, long time. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the look on her face after I said it, not shock, not disgust, just that calm smile, like she heard things like that all the time, or maybe like she understood more than I realized. And then the word she said, maybe you're with the wrong girl. It hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I told myself I was just tired, that I'd been under pressure for weeks, that it didn't mean anything, but deep down, I knew it did. The next morning, Tina was already awake when I opened my eyes. She was on her phone, scrolling like usual. She didn't say good morning. I didn't either. I went to the kitchen and made her a coffee because that's what I always do. When I handed it to her, she barely looked up. Finally, she muttered, "Took you long enough." I stared at her for a second. She didn't notice. She just kept scrolling. Later that day, I tried to get some work done, but I couldn't focus. Slack messages piled up. Code sat untouched, and my brain kept drifting back to Maple and Pine to Julia. I hadn't planned to go back. I really didn't want to turn it into anything. But around noon, I found myself putting on the same hoodie and walking the same route. When I walked in, the place was quieter than the day before. A few people at laptops, one guy on a phone call by the window. Julia was behind the counter tying her apron. She looked up and smiled back again. I felt my chest tighten a little. I nodded. "Yeah, I figured the coffee helped my productivity yesterday." She raised an eyebrow. "Did it though?" I laughed and she handed me a cup before I even ordered. I remember she said as if reading my mind. I sat at the same table. She stayed behind the counter for a while, but about 20 minutes later, she came by to clean the table next to mine. She glanced at my screen. "You actually working today or just enjoying the air conditioning again?" I smiled, trying to work, failing miserably. She leaned slightly against the table. "Can I ask you something? That thing you said yesterday about your girlfriend, you meant it." I hesitated. I wasn't sure what the right answer was. I didn't want to sound like a creep. I didn't want to disrespect Tina either, even if she disrespected me on a daily basis. But I nodded. I didn't plan to say it. It just kind of slipped out. Julia tilted her head. Usually when something slips out, it's because it's been sitting there too long. That line stuck. She didn't wait for a response. She just walked off like it was no big deal. But it was, at least for me. I stayed for another hour, mostly pretending to work. Before I left, I thanked her for the coffee. She said, "Same time tomorrow." I smiled, nodded, and walked out feeling lighter than I had in weeks. That night, things with Tina were exactly the same, cold, short, and transactional. We ate dinner together, but barely spoke. When I asked her how her day was, she said, "Fine, same as always." "Why no reason?" I said. Then she looked up from her plate and said, "You've been weird lately. Did I do something?" I was caught off guard. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say everything. I wanted to scream that I felt like a stranger in my own apartment, that I couldn't breathe around her anymore. But instead, I just said, "I'm tired." She shrugged. "Then sleep." "You look like crap." Later that night, I stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in a long time, I admitted something to myself. I wasn't in love anymore. I hadn't been for a while. I was just staying out of guilt, out of routine, out of fear. But deep down, I knew it couldn't last. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I kept hearing Julia's voice. Usually, when something slips out, it's because it's been sitting there too long. She wasn't wrong. The next morning, I woke up before Tina. I lay there for a while staring at the ceiling, listening to her soft breathing beside me, wondering how two people could be so physically close and yet feel like they lived in different worlds. We didn't speak. She stayed in bed scrolling on her phone. I got dressed, grabbed my laptop, and left the apartment without saying goodbye. I walked the same route as the last 2 days. I didn't even pretend I was going somewhere else. I knew exactly where I wanted to be. While I walked into Maple and Pine, Julia was behind the counter fixing the lid on a to-go cup. She looked up, saw me, and smiled again. The kind of smile that isn't forced or polite. It felt real. 3 in a row, she said, handing me a cup before I even ordered. "I think that means you're officially a regular," I laughed. "You have a good memory." "I have a good instinct," she replied, wiping her hands on a towel. "And you look like someone who needed to come back." She was right. I sat at the same table, opened my laptop, and once again barely worked. After about 30 minutes, she came by holding her own cup. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" I gestured to the chair. "Please." She sat down and leaned forward, resting her arms on the table. So, she said, I've been thinking about what you said the other day. My heart jumped a little. Which part? She smiled. The part where you blurted out that your girlfriend isn't as good looking as me. I laughed nervously. Yeah, that was, not planned. I know, she said. That's why it stuck. There was a pause. Not awkward, just quiet. Then she said something I didn't expect. You looked tired the first time I saw you, not just physically, like soul tired. I looked down at my cup. Yeah, that's accurate. She didn't ask questions right away. She just waited, gave me space. I don't know why. Maybe because I hadn't had a real conversation in so long, but I just started talking. I've been with Tina for 3 years, I said, and I think I've been holding on. To the first 6 months for the other 2.5, she didn't interrupt. It used to be good. I mean, she challenged me, she pushed me, but then it turned into something else. Now it's like everything I do is wrong, like I'm constantly failing some test I didn't even know I was taking. Julia sipped her coffee. She ever thanked you for anything she asked? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, not really. Compliment you. Tell you she's proud of you. I shook my head slowly. She used to. Now it's all you should do better. Or why can't you be more like whatever guy she has in her head this week? Julia nodded. It's hard when love turns into performance. I looked at her. How do you know that? She gave a little smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Been there. We sat in silence again for a moment. There was something grounding about her presence. No pressure, no judgment, no agenda, just calm. I don't know why I'm telling you all this, I said. She shrugged. Sometimes a stranger listens better than the people who claim to love us. That line hit me right in the gut. I looked out the window watching people walk by. I thought about how many times I come home with good news, a work bonus, a client win, a small success, and Tina either ignored it or turned it into something negative. And then I thought about Julia sitting here listening, not trying to fix me, not telling me I was wrong, just being there. I think I'm scared to leave, I said quietly. Not because I love her anymore, but because I don't know who I am without all this noise. Julia looked at me for a long time. Then she said something I'll never forget. You're already someone else, Mark. The guy who walked into this cafe 2 days ago wouldn't have said any of this. He wouldn't have even looked me in the eye. She stood up, put her cup down, and gave me one last glance. You're not broken. You're just buried. Then she walked back to the counter. I sat there for a long time staring into my coffee. And for the first time in years, I started to think that maybe I didn't have to feel like this forever. That night, I didn't go home right away. I sat on a bench near the river for almost an hour, phone buzzing in my pocket. Tina had texted twice. Where are you? You're seriously ignoring me now? I didn't answer. It was cold and I hadn't brought a jacket, but for some reason, the chill felt honest, like something I could finally feel after being numb for so long. I kept thinking about what Julia said. You're not broken, you're just buried. That line didn't just stick. It carved itself into my chest. I felt like I'd been underwater for years, and someone finally pulled me up for air. When I finally did walk through the door, Tina was on the couch, arms crossed, TV on mute. Seriously, she said the moment she saw me. You didn't answer any of my messages. I needed time to think, I replied. She stood up fast, to think about where to run next. You've been off all week. I dropped my backpack by the door. Yeah, I have. Her eyes narrowed. You met someone, didn't you? I didn't say anything. She laughed. Not because it was funny. It was the kind of bitter laugh that hits the back of your spine. I knew it. I knew something was up. Who is she? Some girl at work from your little cafe walks. I stayed quiet. She kept going. You're pathetic, Mark. You meet some barista with a fake smile and suddenly you forget who's been by your side for the last 3 years. Have you really been by my side? I asked. My voice was calm. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't angry, just done. That made her pause. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the person in front of her. I've been with you through everything, she said sharply. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. You've been near me through everything, That's not the same. She blinked a few times. I can't believe you're throwing all of this away for someone you don't even know. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm choosing to stop drowning. You're being dramatic. Am I? Or have I just been quiet for too long? She grabbed her phone, paced the room. You're not thinking straight. You'll regret this. I don't think I will. And that was it. I walked into the bedroom, grabbed my overnight bag, shoved some clothes inside, and tossed my toothbrush in on top. I didn't pack carefully. I didn't take everything. I just took what I needed to not be here tonight. She followed me to the doorway. So that's it. You're leaving. I turned to her. There was no hate in my voice, no resentment, just truth. I can't keep living in a relationship where I constantly feel like I'm not enough, where I get criticized more than I get hugged, where I dread walking through the front door. She didn't answer, so I walked out. I got a cheap motel on the edge of town. It smelled like bleach, and the carpet was stiff, but it was quiet. I lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling, and I cried. Not because I missed her, not because I doubted my decision, but because I'd spent 3 years believing I didn't deserve more. 3 years living under the weight of someone else's idea of who I should be. And finally, I had let that go. I picked up my phone. I didn't really think I'd text Julia, but I did. Hey, I left. I'm not sure where I'm going next, but thanks. You probably don't even know what you did, but you gave me enough strength to say it. I hit send and turned off the screen. 15 minutes later, it buzzed. Julia, you're stronger than you think, Mark. Come by tomorrow. Coffee's on me. I stared at the message for a while. Then, for the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking up in a panic. No voice in my head, no pressure, just silence and peace. I woke up in the motel room just after 7 a.m. The blinds were halfway open and a sliver of sun fell across the cheap blanket pulled up to my chest. I just lay there for a minute staring at the light. It felt quiet. Not the kind of silence you get when something's missing. The kind where your brain finally stops running. I checked my phone. No messages from Tina. No missed calls. Nothing. There was one unread text, though, from Julia. Morning. Still good for that coffee. I sat up and smiled to myself. 15 minutes later, I was walking down that same familiar street toward Maple and Pine. Hoodie on, hands in pockets. A little tired, but lighter than I'd felt in years. While I walked in, Julia was wiping down the counter. She looked up and gave me a look. Not surprised, not dramatic, just that same quiet smile. You came, she said. Told you I would. She slid me a cup without asking. Same as always, exactly. I sat at the corner table. A few people were working on laptops. A couple having breakfast. The music was low. A soft acoustic guitar looped through the speakers. A few minutes later, Julia brought her own cup and sat down across from me again, just like before. She didn't ask anything right away, didn't rush the moment, just sat sipping her drink, waiting until I was ready. I moved out last night, I said quietly. Didn't take much, just the stuff I needed. I stayed in a motel. She nodded. How do you feel? I took a breath. Strangely. Okay. Like I should have done a year ago. Julia looked down at her cup. Leaving isn't easy, especially when you're so used to staying. I thought I was being loyal, I said. Turns out I was just scared. You're not the only one. We sat in silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. She looked at me differently now, like she wasn't just listening, but seeing the version of me I hadn't even figured out yet. I owe you, I said. She shook her head. You don't owe me anything, Mark. You did the hard part on your own. I smiled. Still, you helped. Well, she said, finishing the last sip of her coffee. Then maybe let me help one more time. She pulled a small notepad from her apron pocket and scribbled something down, then tore the page and handed it to me. It was an address just a few blocks away. What's this? My apartment, she said with a grin. It's not a date or anything, but I make a pretty good homemade breakfast, and you look like you could use something besides motel toast. I stared at the paper for a second, then looked back at her. You sure? She nodded. I don't invite people often, but I think we both need a reminder of what it feels like to be treated like a person. I folded the note and tucked it into my pocket. I'll be there, I said. We sat there for another 15 minutes just talking about random things. Favorite music, childhood memories, our worst jobs. She told me she used to want to be a writer. I told her I used to think I'd live in New York by now. It felt easy. No pressure, no performance, just real. Later that afternoon, I packed the rest of my things from the motel and went to look at a short-term rental I'd found online. Small studio, but clean and quiet. I signed the lease the next morning. In the following weeks, Julia and I saw each other almost every day. Sometimes I stopped by Maple and Pine just for a few minutes. Sometimes we'd sit and talk until her shift ended. She never rushed me, never asked what this was or where it was going, and neither did I. One evening, about a month later, we were sitting on her couch watching a movie, the kind where neither of us really cared about the plot. I glanced over and caught her staring at me. What I asked, she smiled. You smile with your eyes now. You didn't used to. That night we kissed for the first time. No big setup, no dramatic music. Just two people who had grown close without forcing it. Tina never reached out again. I never went back. I didn't need closure. I didn't need to hear her side of things one more time. That chapter ended the moment I realized I wasn't the problem. Now, 6 months later, Julia and I live together in that same studio. It's not perfect. We both have our quirks and we've had arguments like anyone else. But she listens. She laughs with me. And sometimes when we're cooking or cleaning or just lying on the floor talking about nothing, she'll look at me and say, "I'm glad you accidentally said it." And I always smile back because sometimes the best things in life really do begin with one honest mistake.